3 states, 8 bookstores, 1 book. Good morning, good evening, and good night, everybody. Today we are going to talk about something that I put a lot of effort into getting. It shouldn't have taken this much effort, but I'm a very stubborn person, and when I decide I'm going to buy something in a bookstore, I buy it in a bookstore. So today we are talking about Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee. If you can tell by that intro, it's this book was a hassle, and because it took so much effort to get this book, I put a lot of expectation in it. I knew going into it, it didn't deserve that much, like, I put such a high standard on it because it took so long to get, and I did have to end up giving up and buying online because no place was selling it, even though they said they were. But that, just be warned, that may have affected my opinion slightly. But this review is also going to be slightly different than my other ones because I'm trying out a new format. I want to do 3 pros and 3 cons. This book may not be the best book to try that out with because I really only have one major problem with it, but I can talk about it in a couple different ways. So with that being said, let's dive on in. Now, Not Your Sidekick follows the main character, Jess. Jess is the daughter of these 2 local superheroes. In this world, superheroes are common, just accept that fact. But the thing is, even though her older sister has powers and her younger brother is a complete genius, Jess doesn't show any signs of having any superpowers. She has gone through the checklist of every power that she can register to have. She can go into superhero training if she has at least one of these. She doesn't. She doesn't have anything. Even though her older sister has some of the most powerful things and her parents are both supers, she should have at least one of them. She doesn't. And so Jess ends up deciding she wants to get an internship. She wants to go to college. She wants to have a decent resume. She wants to build her life up to something that she knows that even though she can't be a superhero, she at least wants to do some good in the world. And unfortunately, Jess ends up taking an internship, a paid internship, mind you, so she does get paid for her work, but she ends up getting an internship with the local supervillains. And along the way, she finds out that her long-term crush also works there. This is a gay romance. It's both female-female. Our main character, Jess, is bi. We don't have an actual label for her love interest, but we know that her love interest is at least interested in girls. So that's the basic premise. That's what got me really interested and really invested in this book. And I also saw an interview with the author, and it seemed so lovely, and I really wanted to read this book. And so I went through that whole mess of trying to find this book. Didn't work out, I had to buy it online. But nevertheless, I got this book. And my expectations were really high, and I knew it wasn't going to be like that. This is a trilogy. Like, the 3rd book just came out, and so it's not a complete story on its own, but it's really good. But I do want to talk about the 3 pros and 3 cons, like I mentioned at the start of this video, because there are some cons, unfortunately. Let's start off with one, actually, the world building. This book, it's not that big of a book. It takes a lot of time, especially in the beginning, focusing on its world building. It's really invested in you knowing why people suddenly have powers, how the power system ended up, why there are superheroes and training camps and supervillains, and how that came to be. When I first started reading this, I didn't want to read the world building, and that is mainly because when it comes to superhero stories, I prefer just it being an accepted fact that some people have powers. I don't need to know there was a solar flare 300 some odd years ago. I don't need to know about the wars. I don't need to know about that. But it does end up taking a crucial part in the latter half of the book. So I can understand why it's there. It just didn't make sense to me at the time. And again, like I said, I was being hypercritical of it, so there is that fact, and that's really my main problem with this book, is the pacing it took with world building. It kind of really hurt that, but that's my main fault with this book, because it's so short. It could have expanded on that, or it could have left it out, whatever it needed to do. There is something I want to mention about the world building, though. Jess, our main character, is half Vietnamese, and this book takes place in the future. And like so far in the future that countries have kind of stopped existing. It's sort of dystopian, I guess. There's this big war, everything fell apart, and they're rebuilding. This part is in, like, after things have been rebuilt. but people are still old enough to remember how countries used to be. So Jess goes into this Asian restaurant in this part of town. It's like essentially like the Chinatown. It's the old part of town, and she loves going there because she loves hearing the culture. She loves hearing the words. But they spent so much time talking about how countries aren't a thing anymore. America isn't a thing. This does take place in Arizona, by the way. But so Jess grew up all in this, what used to be Arizona, but she's so invested in learning about her culture. I get it, you want to know where you're from, but it spends so much time talking about how she's not Vietnamese enough, she's not Asian enough, and I'm just kind of sitting there like, those places, they don't exist in this world anymore. They used to, yeah, but that was over 100 years ago. And so, it slows down the pacing of the book just enough that it bothers me. Romance. I am not a person who likes romance in my books. I prefer if the characters just live their life, maybe find a platonic soulmate along the way, but I don't need a lovey-dovey relationship. I don't want that, because inevitably it will, to take over the plot. This book handles it incredibly well, though. Again, our main character, Jess, has a very strong and noticeable crush on one of her colleagues now. And again, they're still in high school, so it's like the high school crush. And there's another person working at that internship that Jess ends up confessing about her crush to this person to. And that person is just, it's so open and honest the way Jess is to them. This person, they don't know the gender, they don't know the identity, they're simply known as M. M is kind of like the unknown sidekick of the supervillains. You've never seen M out on the battlefield before, but M is the one who kind of takes control of the suits that after the mischiefs are the villains, after they're done using them, but the tech is still worth something, M is the one who kind of goes in and figures that stuff out. Abby, Jess's crush, is also working there, but she doesn't really interact with Jess that much. And so Jess ends up confessing to M how much she loves Abby. Well, not loves. It's not love at first. It is a schoolgirl crush. But she ends up confessing to M, and it's like, this person means so much to me. Abby is incredibly smart. She does so much with technology. It makes sense for her to work in a tech industry setting that the supervillains run. And so Jess is kind of pulled between oh wow, I'm working for villains. This is great teenage rebellion because her parents are the superheroes. But she also has to deal with the fact that her crush is associated with the villains. And so that doesn't take too much of a part in the plot, but it is a certain aspect in the beginning. It's that's a thing, that's uncomfortable, but they get over it pretty quick. And the romance from there, because they do end up sort of together, kind of not, it's really complicated. But they do end up confessing their feelings for each other, and it's so adorable. It's so hard for me to get invested in a romance in a book, because that just does not happen for me. I think 2 books have managed to get me invested in the relationships of the characters before. It's this one and Magnus Chase, so plus on that. Con, pacing. I mentioned this before, but the world building really slows down the pacing of this book. There's also this really amazing climax in the middle of the book. That's the thing. It's this great important part, turning point. It's in the middle of the book, and then the latter half of the book is kind of the fallout from that. And it's really odd, because it's oh wow, this is great. This should be the end of the book, and then it doesn't end. It just kind of keeps going on. And while it's really fascinating to discuss the consequences of a book, this is a trilogy. They could have done that in a later book. Or maybe there's a climax in here, and then there's kind of a secondary climax, and they could have moved the focus more towards the secondary one to make the ending feel more impactful. But this pacing in this book is really kind of, it's off, and it's really strange, because it's you want to get invested in this book, but at the same time, it's I don't need to hear about this fact. It is important later, but at the time, again, it goes back to the whole world building thing. Pro character development. It's so rare to see a YA book that the characters actually grow, they actually develop. They become someone different than who they were at the start of the book. This book very much centers around that everyone has a story, everyone has a flaw, no one is perfect, and it's so lovely to see that idea thought about and developed. Yeah, these people, even though they're heroes, they're not perfect. That can't be the case. Everyone here has a story, even the side characters, and the side characters are lovely. Like, I don't want to go too much into detail on some of them because a lot of the plot points happen later in the book, but there's this one character, and I'm just, their story. They're lovely. This book also has a ton of representation, like, I mean a ton. Again, our main character is bi, and then one of her best friends is trans, and it's so, like, good because Jess is interacting with M, and she doesn't know M's identity. There's a scene where, and she's like, hey, I'm sorry, my friend would have killed me because I haven't asked yet, but what pronouns do you use? And it's just, can that be a normal thing? Please. Like, if a character is gender ambiguous, just ask, hey, I don't want to screw up, what pronouns do I use for you? I'm so happy that that was included in this book. This book is so good with representation. Again, Jess, bisexual, half Vietnamese, her best friend is trans, and it's just, Okay, the next pro and the next con kind of have two things. I mean, they're kind of two things that are, they're very, like, attached to each other. The con is some things were incredibly obvious, and I'm just, okay, let me read you the synopsis, like, just the bottom half. The mysterious M, who never seems to be in the same place as Abby, but what started as a fun way to spite her superhero parents takes a sudden turn for worse. And I'm just like, that line where it's like M is never in the same place as Abby, that's in the synopsis. And I get it, you weren't trying to be subtle about it, but please. Like, the character acts so oblivious. She doesn't know that, and we're over here reading it, and I'm like, it's in the synopsis. We're supposed to know that M is Abby, right? Like, I feel like that's a very obvious thing because you put it on the back of the book. And it's just, there's a couple things in this book where it's like you're reading it, and I'm like, why is this character not figuring this out? Because it's so obvious to the reader, and the story is told in Jess's point of view, and she's not figuring it out. And so she's supposed to be really smart. She is really smart in some occasions, but every now and then she purposely ignores some things, and it's annoying. And then the final pro, there are some really good red herrings in here. You're so focused on, oh wow, this seems so obvious, that the plot twist in this book, okay, like, I cannot talk about them because it's literally like suddenly like you're reading it and then you turn the page and like, and it's again, it's so good. I really loved this book because it's like, you're so focused on the obvious. You're so focused on like Jess's romance with Abby, and is M Abby, and like what if her parents find out that she's working for the villains, and then suddenly it's like, there's this entire like, there's a reason this book spends so much time on world building. Annoying as it is in the start, as much as it slows down the pacing, it's worth it. So yeah, I guess that is Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee. I think on Goodreads I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really think it's like a 4.5. I had so much expectation going into this. And again, there are some flaws, the pacing and world building, but that's it. That's really it. There's so many good things in this book. And it's a trilogy. And this is one of the few series I really plan on continuing. I have a really bad time continuing a series, but I'm reading this one. And I think it's either it's book 3 that just came out, or it's coming out. And I cannot wait to read it, but I'm doing a book buying ban right now, so I gotta read like, I think it's like 15 more books before I can buy the next one, so might be a while, but this is so good. I really recommend you guys pick this up. Again, it's not a 5-star read, but I did have ridiculous high expectations going into it, so you might have a different experience than I do. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you liked this video or liked this series, or if you want to get into this series, leave that down in the comment section down below. And while you're there, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And as always, good night, good evening, and good morning, everybody. Now, I know most of you know this, I have a band-aid on my finger. Don't mess around with scissors, kids. Don't do that.